will head over to our tier 3 of running backs. So let me go over kind of some of these names to round out our top 20, top 25. So kind of collectively, these are guys like Andre Ellington, Doug Martin, Ray Rice, Ryan Matthews, Pierre Thomas, because it's a PPR league, Reggie Bush, Ben Tate, CJ Spiller, those type guys. So one of the guys that's going to be very difficult this season to rank, kind of two back-to-back guys actually, but Ray Rice coming off just a horrific season last year. Then he had all this off-the-field drama over the off season here with his fiance and now wife and so forth, and people are just really, really down on him. So it makes him a very good potential value if indeed he can actually produce like we've seen him produce over the last 5 to 7 years and get his value back up. So Jim, you gonna talk on Ray Rice here because you have him all the way back up to his glory days. Well, not quite there, but you've got him as your 7th running back overall. I'm very down on him and concerned. Got him at 18th, and Jay's got him even lower at 22. So why are you so confident that one Mr. Ray Rice is going to have such the bounce back year from his dismal season of 2013?
I just think he's got to bounce back, and I just got to have hope for the guy. He obviously took out his aggression out on his wife, but I think we're going to see him take it out on the field now too. Gary Kubiak came in. We all know what he did with Arian Foster. I think we're going to see a similar situation with Ray Rice. Just trust him. Keep feeding him the ball. They tried passing the ball a lot more, and it worked for them when they won the Super Bowl. And then it didn't work last year when they tried to rely on the brow of Flacco to throw again this last year. So my point is I just think you're going to see a bounce back. Honestly, mostly a gut-level feeling. I just think he's going to have a great year compared to where he was at last year. I wouldn't say he's a top 5 guy. I think he's going to sneak in somewhere in the top 10, and he's going to have a good year. I think there's a lot of value if you can pull him out in the second round, late second round or something. Even third, he might even fall that far, quite frankly. So.
Yeah, absolutely he might fall that far because he needs to fall that far. I think Ray Rice is another guy that's just kind of riding off into the sunset. I don't think he's going to be very relevant much anymore. You'll see him have his little stints of glory here and there, but I've got him at 23 because I don't think he's going to produce very much this year. I think the Ravens are going to have a down year in general, personally. So Ray Rice at 23, right around Trent Richardson area, Chris Johnson area. I'd take Shane Vereen or Rashad Jennings before I took Ray Rice.
All right, guys, we need to start speeding things up. So we're going to head right to probably the toughest guy from a running back perspective to put on the board here with Doug Martin. So, Jay, you've got him, ADP's at 11th in a non-PPR. You've got him at 13th. So you're a little higher on him. What do you think about Doug Martin's productivity if going into 2014 after last year's debacle?
Well, if Lovie Smith, the new head coach down there in Tampa, described the new offensive coordinator, Jeff Tedford's offense, as, quote, a running attack that can pass the football. And Martin is the lead back of that running attack. As a matter of fact, Lovie Smith said that himself. He said that he is their bell cow. He is definitely going to be a guy. He's only 25 years old. He's still got plenty of resilience. He had his injury. He won't be limited in his carries this year. I see 300 carries, maybe more. He averages 86.6 yards a game rushing and 24.5 yards a game receiving. 2012, this guy rushed for 1,454 yards and 11 touchdowns. He also had 472 yards receiving. The injury was to his shoulder, you guys, so it's not his knee, not his ankle, or his legs in any way, shape, or form. This is an injury a running back can come back from and still thrive, and have an amazing year. I think his poor pre-injury performance last year was mostly due to a piss-poor Josh Freeman rather than the muscle hamster having a lack of talent. So I think he ends up with 290 carries for 1,350 rushing yards. He's going to catch at least 35 balls for around 400 yards. He's going to be drafted as a running back 1. he'll finish in the top 15, and he may surprise some people with a top 10 performance in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still scared of him, like a lot of people are. But he's one of these cases where, if, because of his poor performance last year and then him getting injured, if he can go back to his 2013 form, he can be a great value. So I'm just kind of taking this from the perspective of, let's just kind of see how he does in the offseason, how he does through the preseason games, and see if the confidence can build back up to draft him as such. So, all right, another guy that's definitely had some injury issues over the years is one DeMarco Murray. Current ADP, again in non-PPR, has him as 12th. It'd probably be a little bit higher than that in PPR. I've got him at 13th in my rankings. Last year was one of the years that he actually played a fair amount compared to previous seasons. So last year he played 14 games last year. The year before 10, the year before 13. So he's kind of hovering anywhere from 10 to 14 games is kind of the concern with DeMarco. But last year he had 217 attempts, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, 53 catches. So he's very good for PPR. That was a 10th among running backs from catching the ball out of the backfield. And he had 5.2 yards a carry, which is also a pretty solid number. Jason Garrett is still the pretend head coach there in Dallas. They actually did not draft Johnny Manziel last night, which would have been just a horrific pick, I think, in my opinion. Bill Callahan is still technically the offensive coordinator, but the Cowboys did bring in Scott Linehan.
Boo!
Yeah, it's coming from a resident Lions fan.
Boo!
He's booing because Scott was the offensive coordinator the last 5 years for Detroit. But the bottom line is, it is a change. We have to mention it. They're actually calling him the, quote, passing game coordinator / play caller. So this is Jerry Jones bullshit kind of coming into play here, making up some special name for this guy, even though they already have an offensive coordinator. So it's kind of weird. But at the end of the day, you still have to, it's still relevant. I mean, this guy's coming from an offense of which, he was used to using the Bell-Bush combo. I think they may bring in DeMarco, maybe splitting the carries a little bit more with Lance Dunbar potentially, if the influence of Scott pans out there. But I'm a little down on him again because I'm concerned about his injury history, and we're ranking these guys where we think they're going to finish at the end of the season, which is incorporating our hesitancies to rank them high because of potential injury. So at the end of the day, I see this guy as getting about 190 attempts, which is down from last year, 950 yards, 8 touchdowns, maybe 30 catches for 200 yards. So I see him as a low-end RB2 in a PPR league.
Yeah, listen, all I have to say about the whole Scott Linehan and Dallas thing, I don't know how much it'll affect DeMarco Murray. If the guy can stay healthy, he'll be great. But Scott Linehan, that is all I have to say about that. Jim, what do you think DeMarco is going to do this year? I'm sure you think he's going to.
I hate DeMarco.
Cardboard or something.
I hate DeMarco.
All right. Well, we're gonna move along here to go onto a guy who's a little more happy than DeMarco Murray on the scale of where people think he's going to end up, at least in this group, and that's Andre Ellington. Jim, he's ADP is 14th overall. You've got him going 9th. So let's hear it.
Big season. Big things coming for this young man. He played out of his mind. He had the most yards per attempt in the NFL as a rookie. Loved him. Loved him when he played for Clemson. Think he has a bright future. Mendenhall's gone because he's a quitter. Stephon Taylor, I think, is vastly overrated out of Stanford. And Jonathan Dwyer, he came from that same Steelers offense, and actually I believe it's the same offensive coordinator at the Cardinals now that had him before. So I think they brought him in more as like a safety. I don't think they actually brought him in as a every down back. So that's why I just see Andre Ellington making plays. I think they're going to draft a quarterback at some point. Wait, did they? No, not yet. They'll draft a quarterback at some point. They're going to need someone to replace Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, as much as you hate him or love him, he's still going to throw 4,000 yards, 5,000 yards, something ridiculous. Throw 20 TDs and 25 picks. I mean, that's just what Carson Palmer does. So with that, I think we're going to see a lot more receptions for Andre Ellington. I think we're going to see some big moves there for him. As far as rushing the ball, don't know how much of that we're really going to see this year, but let's see what other weapons they pick up. And I think a bright future for him. I think this is just a gut feeling. I think he cracks the top 10, and I think he's a great pickup for anyone.
Yeah, my concern with Andre is not his ability or talent. I think that's clear. I mean, he led the league in yards per carry at 5.5 last season. So that's there. My concern is strictly from a value perspective. Andre is definitely the sexy pick so far in the offseason, like maybe CJ Spiller ended up being last year. I mean, he's the guy just going to rise up draft boards, and he may get to a point where his value isn't there, and I may not be able to draft him because he's going to go too high. That's honestly my concern with Andre. But from a talent perspective, the guy is extremely dynamic. You can't argue against that. He's not the biggest guy. He's not really a 3-down back, but he doesn't necessarily need to be to put up fantastic fantasy numbers. And especially in PPR leagues. So he's definitely talented and very excited about him. I'm just worried the excitement's going to get too high. It's going to push his draft value and out of the realm that I'm willing to take him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly what's going to happen, actually. I had Andre Ellington for a while last year. The biggest problem with him was Mendenhall sneaking in there and getting goal line carries and stuff, which, may still happen. But, well, not Mendenhall, but somebody else. But we're going to move on to Pierre Thomas now. His ADP is 31st. Now, again, that's standard league because that's all we can get right now. Rob, you've got him at 19th. Darren Sproles is gone, so I think you're probably right with this guy. Why don't you tell us why?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really high on him. I was last year, and he really panned out for me. Speaking of last year, the guy, he had 147 rushing attempts for, 550 yards. His yards per carry wasn't great at 3.7, but that's not really what he does. I mean, they're going to have Mark Ingram in there for that. But he had 77 receptions. That's led all running backs in catches out of the backfield. And as a reminder, that was with Sproles on that team, which caught, he caught probably 70-something balls himself. So, he caught those balls for 513 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Pierre Thomas had a huge spike last year, even with Sproles being there. Sproles is now gone. That only means that his receptions are at least going to maintain itself, if not potentially even increase. The other thing about Pierre Thomas, he's a little long in the tooth, but the guy does not miss games. I mean, he's played in 15 or 16 games the last 3 straight seasons, and he was, of course, in the NFL much before that. So, Ingram does not appear to be super trusted by the staff. They didn't pick up his option this off season, so Ingram's probably on his way out. That was issues with the cap and whatnot. So Kyrie Robinson is the guy that's probably more relevant in standard leagues, maybe even than Ingram this year. If you're going to take a flyer on a guy in late rounds potentially, but at the end of the day. I think he's going to end up being in PPR leagues again. Again, if it's standard leagues, he's probably running back depth, flex type play. But in PPR leagues, I see him. I've got him ranked 19th. That puts him as a low-end RB2. I see him getting another 150 attempts for 600 yards, rushing 4 touchdowns. But it's hard to put him above 77 receptions because that was first in the league last year. So I've got him at 75 receptions, 500 yards, couple touchdowns. So he's very solid. Do not be afraid to draft this guy as your RB2, and if you can get him as your flex, it's just a bonus.
Yeah, definitely. Pierre Thomas is going to be a great RB2 this year. Like I said, the exodus Darren Sproles is huge. This guy is going to catch a shit ton of passes. I've actually got him at number 16. I'm going to be targeting him in drafts this year for sure. Jim, what are your thoughts on Pierre?
I like him. I think he's going to have a good year. I don't really disagree with anything you guys have said so far. I think something interesting just to bring up is they brought in Braden Cooks, who's a deep route runner, great route runner actually. And so I don't know what exactly role he'll play opposite of Colston, but I think that could open it up for a lot more for Pierre Thomas. So I think actually his value to me went up from where I had him, and I had him Not too low, actually. Where did I have him? Pierre Thomas, I had him at 17. Yeah, he might even jump into my top 15 after what we just saw in the draft. So.
Yeah, and I got 2 words for you guys. Kenny Stills, sleeper. He's going to kill it this year. He's going to be a solid, wide receiver for guys, especially for depth. Wide receiver 3, could even get wide receiver 2 in that offense. Just kind of throwing that out there. So, so guys, that's it for us this week. On our next show, we'll be breaking down and tiering the top 25 fantasy wide receivers for 2014. It's a very similar show, but talking about wide receivers instead of running backs. We'll be comparing our rankings and our tier groups to the current ADP, again, on Fantasy Football Calculator. So tune in a couple weeks to see how we match up with those numbers. And again, to remind everybody, we're live every 2 weeks here in the off season. We'll switch to every week again as we get closer to the start of the NFL season. So tune in on Friday, May 23rd for our next live hangout. But we will, however, given that we just had the NFL draft, we're going to be popping on early next week for a special NFL draft recap show and discussing all the fantasy relevant rookies coming into these different scenarios for 2014. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be tweeting those shows out and let you know about it. So in the meantime, you can download our show on iTunes. You can now find us on Stitcher Radio, and you can check out our previous shows on the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and tweet us all your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. So, for the Cushman, the Jimmer, I am Rob Smith. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.